Welcome back. For the past 3 years, a massive coral bleaching event has been impacting local Gulf waters and worldwide, really. Part of the issue is the record temperatures of the water. But there is some encouraging news. Some scientists say the effect is now slowing. Even that is controversial, though. Tonight, our guests include the professor of marine biology at New College of Florida, Dr. Sandra Gilchrist on the left, the president and CEO of Mote Marine, Dr. Michael Crosby in the middle, and the founder and president of the Southwest Florida Women Divers Club, Lisa Regis. Thank you all for being here.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
So many laymen, like myself, are not overly familiar with coral bleaching. Let's just lob you a softball to start, Dr. Gilchrist. How would you describe it, let's say, to a 5th grade class?
Okay. Coral bleaching, in essence, is when the coral itself, which is an animal, has its zooxanthellae, which is an alga, that leaves. And so that makes the tissue look white or a golden color because it's those algae that actually give it the color that they have. Without those algae, they are deprived of a part of their carbon source, which is a food source. So alone, the coral animal is in an area that is almost a desert, if you will. And I would talk to students about deserts and how the resources are depleted in those kinds of areas. So
I guess a real 101 fact is, Dr. Crosby, that corals itself are animals. Mm-hmm. Corals are animals, and the plants within are called the algae.
Yes, and if you really think of a coral reef and the coral polyp itself as a mini community, it is really everything. It is a rock, it is an animal, and it is a plant. Mm-hmm. Because as Dr. Gilchrist said, the coral itself, the polyp, is an animal. It has that symbiotic algae that lives in a very close relationship with it as a plant, and it produces calcium carbonate, which is really that hard skeleton, that rock that most people think of as the coral reef. And in fact, that is a very important component of the reef's great value to us and to human society, is that reef acts as a form of coastal barrier, if you will, to large waves and storms. Florida Keys, for instance, would not exist without good, healthy coral reef ecosystem.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
Now, Lisa, you formed a local dive club with no intention of becoming an expert on coral bleaching, but then what happened next?
Well, we had a lot of interest from some of our members in getting more involved with underwater conservation efforts and what we could do in our community to play part in that. And so recently, Stanford and Columbia University had located and reached out to me to get involved in a project where we would compile photos and video footage on our local dives to actually compile some images that they would then use in research on their end. So.
Dr. Gilchrist, warming seems to be the reoccurring theme here, but not everyone believes that global warming is a fact. And in fact, NOAA says that the bleaching is slowing down. Is that true too?
yes and no. What they're talking about is a global event, and there have been supposedly 3 recorded global events. And so what you see globally is that there are areas that have slowed down, but locally it's a very different picture. So while you have that global model, if you look at Florida, we're in an area that happens to have a moderate slowdown rather than this nice slowdown that people are talking about. So the model itself is a very broad model, and it has its values because it's looking at sea surface temperature, but there's a lot of caution out there among scientists that there are pockets and certainly large areas where we really aren't seeing a slowdown. And then we also have potentially ocean acidification, which is coming in and also stressing the corals. So we're not out of the woods yet,
right,
even though there are some changes that we're seeing.
All right, hold that thought. We'll take a quick break to talk more about this in a moment. We'll have the forecast as well. After this, stay with us. Welcome back. Tonight we are discussing how the heat is affecting the marine life in the ocean. Our guests tonight include the professor of marine biology at New College of Florida, Dr. Sandra Gilchrist, the president of Moat Marine, Dr. Michael Crosby, and the founder of the Southwest Florida Women Divers Club, Lisa Regas. Before we went to the break, we were talking about coral bleaching and its problem from the Great Barrier Reef to the Suncoast. But Dr. Crosby, how much coral reef is there off of the Suncoast?
Well, there's a fair amount actually here. We're in a good location for it in terms of water temperature. It's not quite as clear of water as we would find down in the Keys, but there are some very, very prominent coral reef habitats here, and it's important that we monitor those reefs as well because they contribute to a good, healthy ocean as well.
And Lisa, you formed your dive club about 4 years ago, you said. When you first began diving, had you ever heard of coral bleaching before?
I actually had not. In fact, I had not. And we just started out at recreationally diving in the area. And I'd say in the last couple of years when we'd be diving offshore, like off the beaches, you can tell something wasn't right. You could tell some of the coral was a little bit distressed. But especially this year, it's a lot more evident just in the last year, I'd say.
And you said during the break one of the hot spots for diving for coral is off Holmes Beach?
Well, we call it Spanish Rocks, and it's a reef about the size of a football field, and it's just off the beach, about 50, 100 feet off the beach, and is absolutely spectacular. So,
Good. Dr. Gilchrist, how much of your curriculum at New College deals with coral bleaching?
That would be hard to actually say because we have aspects of it in chemistry, aspects in biology and physics, and even in ethics classes and things like that. So I would say there's not necessarily a huge portion, but it's sort of woven throughout the curriculum in different areas because it's not something that's just focused in one place. It's a lot of different things coming together.
I've done some reading today. It's a large issue, and I'd say that most people, the layman, really isn't aware of this. Wouldn't you agree?
I would say that if they're watching particular kinds of documentaries or things like that, there's recently been one on the Barrier Reef, then they may be more informed. But I think in general, we don't really see much information on this, although it's a global phenomenon.
Dr. Crosby, I heard you sort of take issue with NOAA suggesting that this whole phenomena is slowing. You don't think that's the case?
No, I would agree with their forecast that in the near term there looks to be less of a probability of as massive or widespread bleaching due to the higher ocean temperatures. But on a more localized level, you will see an extremely high amount of variability. For instance, our researchers down in the Keys right now are telling me that we're this close to having a bleaching event, but the model is something that is really useful on a much larger regional and global scale as opposed to a local regional forecasting like perhaps a weather forecast would be.
I guess the big question I've been waiting to ask is what can be done to slow this down?
Well, you asked a very important question, and Moat's research is particularly focused on what can be done to mitigate the impacts of climate change. We're talking tonight about one of the primary impacts, which is the increasing water temperature, but there's also ocean acidification with the pH going down. Both of these stress corals to the point that they then become much more susceptible to disease. So it's a very large problem, and what Moat's research is focused on is how do we mitigate against those impacts. And in fact, we have had some phenomenal breakthroughs in new technologies that we are confident and we've demonstrated we are going to be able to restore Florida's coral reefs and coral reefs all around the world in our lifetime with this new technology that allows us to identify the particular genetic strains of the naturally occurring corals, but the genetic strains that are more resilient, more resistant to the increasing temperature, the decreasing pH, and to disease. So while society figures out how to deal with the forcing functions of climate change, Moat is focused on ensuring that we do not lose our coral reefs while we try to figure out what to do about it.
Once you identify exactly what you're talking about, how would you go about slowing down the effects in layman's terms?
We're already planting the coral reefs.
Planting.
We're already restoring the coral reefs. We have, to date, primarily had philanthropic support to do this. Much of the research was philanthropic. but we're very, very fortunate that this past legislative session, the state of Florida finally appropriated and the governor signed off and approved a $500,000 allocation for us to actually implement on a much larger scale the coral restoration program in the Keys. And that's when we're going to need folks like Lisa and her dive club, because we're going to depend in great part on volunteer citizen scientists to help us. Everything from the dive clubs to the Young Scuba Nauts International program, to the Combat Wounded Veterans Challenge. All together with our scientists, we're going to come together and we're going to restore these coral reefs.
Yeah. Lisa began as a recreational dive club, and now suddenly you've been deputized as a volunteer citizen scientist.
Absolutely. It's been very fulfilling, as a matter of fact, and I'd love to encourage other divers in the area, women and men, to get more involved in what they can do to contribute to helping with the underwater research programs, coral restoration.
I heard a statistic during Kate Flexter's story earlier in the show that she said coral reefs generate $5 billion in economic activity and also 70,000 jobs. I said, how is that?
Let me offer a slight correction.
Yeah.
It's actually $6.2 billion just to the state of Florida alone, 71,000 jobs. All the biodiversity, 6,000 different species, the coastal resilience I talked to, and if you want a good healthy ocean, you need good healthy coral reefs. And if you think about the fact that 50 to 80% of the oxygen that you're breathing right now comes from the ocean, not from the land, you want to be able to breathe. If you don't care about the economy, you don't care about biodiversity, you want to be able to breathe, we need to restore these coral reefs.
You have my attention now. Yes. Well, when you talk about the impact on the economy, it's people like Lisa and her dive club at the smallest level, isn't it?
Yes, it absolutely is. When you think about recreational diving, commercial recreational fishing, all of the byproducts of a good healthy reef that really help us maintain and improve and enhance the quality of life for everyone in Florida. It doesn't matter where you live, you're connected to the reefs and to the ocean.
Dr. Gilchrist, are you pleased with what you've seen from Tallahassee so far? Is the government taking this seriously enough for you?
I think that it's beginning to, and it's very hard in some sense to explain when you're talking about things that are happening over long periods of time, and where you can show things that really are very, very incremental. And so it's hard to convince people of what the problems really are. So I'm not blaming anyone there, because there are certainly immediate problems that you want to address, but there are things that people in general can do, like pick up your bottles and your microplastics, watch those kinds of things. Watch how much water you're using, because that can cause problems when you have water running off into the ocean, fertilizer, all kinds of things. So there are a lot of things that individuals can do that are very, very important, that are going to be short term but have a long term impact. And I think in Tallahassee, they're thinking about things like that as well. In terms of funding the research, like Michael was a little bit modest about some of the things, like some of the different clades or types of those algae are extremely important to understand and how they interact, and some of them are more resilient. And even understanding that is something we've just really started to do, as well as the microbial community, which again, Moat, New College, and other places are really now starting to understand. So the funding is there, and it's coming, but it's coming slowly.
All right, we'll stop on that note and take a break, come back with some final thoughts on this topic, and your reaction to last night's show on transgenders in the military. Sharp turn. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're discussing the effects of coral bleaching and its impact on our local waterways and our economy. Our guests now have some final thoughts. We'll start with the founder of a local dive club. And Lisa, what are your thoughts on this issue?
My final thoughts would be, just from the recreational diver standpoint, is just get involved in your community. If you're a diver and you dive recreationally, you can make a difference and you can do your part. And they do really depend on us to compile some of the research that helps support some of these amazing programs that are out there.
Dr. Crosby?
Well, I think the panel that you've put together tonight is illustrative of exactly what we need to solve this problem and to ensure that we don't lose our coral reefs and they're here for the next generation. And it really is about the support from the community, but also the partnerships. The partnerships that MODE has with our volunteer citizen scientists, the partnerships that we have with the academic researchers and the students at New College. This is how we're going to address the problem. This is how we're going to solve the problem together.
Dr. Gilchrist.
I would have said the exact same thing that Michael did. I think education is the key, and education, everyone from our legislature down to our local population, it's our ocean, and if we don't take care of it, no one is. And so education is critical.
Education. Also, you mentioned how we can help locally from litter, of course, to watching our stormwater runoff with the sprinklers and the sewers and so forth and into the waterways.
Exactly, and picking up your trash when you go to the beach, don't just pick up your trash, pick up other trash. There are all kinds of things that you can do at a very individual level that can make a difference.
We've got 10 seconds. Lisa, how do folks find out about your dive club if they want to get involved?
We are actually either on Meetup or womensdiveclub.com.
All right. Very good. Before we go, we want to share some of the viewer letters about last night's topic. A very different topic, of course, President Trump's transgender military ban. You'll recall just last year, President Obama announced his administration would allow transgenders to serve. But now President Trump says their service has brought tremendous medical costs and disruption. According to the National Center for Transgender Equality, there are more than 134,000 American transgender veterans, with currently about 15,000 serving. So here are some of your comments. Jill said, "Sad day in America. Discrimination is shameful." Barbara said, "If generals and commanders are seeing a problem from the Obama decision to allow them in, then we need to trust their judgment that it needs to be reversed. Give the ones who are give those who are in an honorable discharge." Christine writes, 15,000 transgender troops already in the military. Kicking them out weakens our readiness, wouldn't you say? If you want to join the conversation on last night's topic or tonight's coral bleaching, go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/news@7. You can also watch past discussions on demand. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and also on Roku. So thank you to our guests, Dr. Gilchrist, Dr. Crosby, and also Lisa Regas. Great to meet you all.
Nice to meet you, Jim.
Likewise.
Great to see you.